My name is Connor. My mother died of cancer when I was 12. The house I grew up in, a modest 3-bedroom on Lyndale Street, had actually come from her side of the family, passed down from my grandparents. After she passed, my father, in his grief, made a decision that I didn't fully understand until years later. He transferred the title of the house into my name, with himself listed as a life tenant, meaning he had the legal right to live there for the rest of his life, but ownership itself belonged to me. His lawyer at the time told him it was the cleanest way to make sure the house, my mother's family home, stayed with me no matter what happened in his life afterward. He signed the paperwork when I was 13 and never mentioned it again. I only found out about it myself when I turned 18 and a thick envelope from a law office showed up with my name on it. 3 years after my mother died, my father remarried a woman named Diane, who had 2 kids from a previous marriage, my stepbrother Cole and stepsister Avery. I was 15 at the time, and I tried genuinely to make the new family work. Diane tried too, in her own way, for a while, but over the years something shifted. Diane started referring to the house as her house in casual conversation, decorating it, renovating the kitchen, hosting her side of the family for every holiday like it had always belonged to her. My father never corrected her. I don't think he saw the point in bringing up old paperwork from a marriage that had ended in tragedy, not divorce. I moved out for college at 18 and settled 2 hours away after graduating, visiting on holidays, calling my dad every Sunday. The house stopped feeling like mine in any emotional sense long before the locks ever changed. My father passed away suddenly from a heart attack 11 months ago. He was 61. I got the call from Diane at work, and I don't remember most of the drive to the hospital, just the fluorescent lights and a doctor saying words I couldn't fully process. The funeral was difficult in all the ways funerals are difficult, but Diane and I were civil. We sat together. We cried together even. For those few days, whatever tension had built up over the years quietly took a back seat. I went back to my apartment after the funeral, gave myself about a week to process everything, and then called Diane to ask when would be a good time to come by and go through some of my dad's belongings, specifically a box of old photo albums from before Diane was even in the picture, photos of my mother that I desperately wanted to keep. She was short with me on the phone, said she hadn't had time to sort through anything yet, and that she'd let me know. I didn't think much of it. Grief makes people short with each other sometimes. 4 days later, I drove down anyway, mostly because I couldn't stop thinking about those photo albums. That's when my key didn't turn in the lock. That's when Diane opened the door just wide enough to deliver the news that, as far as she was concerned, the house, and everything in it, was hers now. "Your father and I were married for 16 years, she said. This is my home. I think it's time you accepted that and moved on." I stood on that porch for a long moment, genuinely speechless, before I said the only thing I could think of. "Diane, the house isn't in Dad's name. It never has been since I was 13. She laughed, actually laughed, and closed the door. I sat in my car outside that house for almost 20 minutes before I called the one person who could actually help me. My father's old lawyer, the same one who'd handled the original transfer 13 years earlier. He remembered the case immediately, pulled up the file, and confirmed exactly what I already knew. The title to the property had been in my name since I was 13 years old. My father had been listed as a life tenant, meaning his right to live there ended, legally, the moment he passed away. There was no ambiguity. There was no shared ownership through the marriage. The house had never been part of the marital estate at all. The lawyer explained that Diane, as my father's widow, might have certain rights depending on how things were structured, but in this specific case, life tenancy ending at death, full title already vested in me, she had no legal claim to remain in the home against my wishes. I had every right to request her departure and, if needed, to formally evict her through the proper legal channels. I didn't want to drag this through court if I didn't have to. I asked the lawyer to draft a formal letter instead, clear, professional, citing the exact deed information, the exact statute, and a reasonable 30-day timeline for Diane to make arrangements to leave. I had it delivered to the house by certified mail 3 days later, I also, on the lawyer's advice, brought a locksmith and a county sheriff's deputy with me the following week, not to force anyone out illegally, but to formally reestablish access to a property that was unquestionably, legally, mine. Diane was home when the locksmith and the deputy and I arrived. She came to the door already holding a copy of the letter the lawyer had sent. "You can't just kick me out of my own house," she said, her voice shaking with anger rather than grief now. "It was never your house, Diane," I said as calmly as I could manage. "It was my mother's family home. Dad transferred it to me when I was 13, before you and I had even met. You've lived here for 16 years because Dad chose to share his life with you here. That right ended the day he died." She tried arguing that she'd put money into renovations, that her name should count for something after 16 years. The deputy, calmly and professionally, explained that none of that changed the legal ownership of the property itself, and that any reimbursement claims for renovations would need to go through civil court separately, not by refusing to vacate a home she had no title to. Cole and Avery, my step-siblings, weren't there for that conversation, but I found out afterward that they were genuinely shocked too. Apparently Diane had told them for years that the house would eventually be split between all three of us. It never occurred to any of them to question that. Because why would they? Diane moved out over the following month into a rental property closer to her sister. We haven't spoken much since, beyond a few brief, business-like messages about remaining renovation reimbursement claims, which were settled fairly through her lawyer and mine. I found the photo albums in a closet, exactly where I remembered them being years ago. My mother's handwriting was still on the back of half the photos, little notes about who was in each picture and where it was taken. I live in the house now. It needed some work. Diane's renovations weren't exactly my taste, but slowly, room by room, it's starting to feel like the home I remember from before I was 12. I kept a few of her additions, honestly, because not everything she touched was bad. I'm not interested in erasing 16 years of my father's life out of spite. What I am interested in is finally living in the one place that's always, legally and emotionally, belonged to my mother's side of the family. The place my father quietly protected for me, even when I didn't fully understand why, 13 years before anyone tried to change the locks on me. If this story got to you, next week's story is just as unexpected. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss it.